Homesteading is very labor intensive. I mean, that shouldn't really come as a surprise, but I've noticed that it's very easy to get sucked into tasks and repetitive chores that leads to one of two things. A, you don't want to do them anymore at some point because it gets old, right? Burnout is what I've heard from many homesteaders, especially those who don't do it professionally maybe and do it maybe as a side hustle like we do, but also from a profitability perspective because time isn't free. And a lot of people think that, well, if I invest my time, my labor, it's for free, but it's not. In fact, time is the only thing that I cannot make more of. So my time is incredibly valuable. And so in this video, I want to introduce you to a couple of tools, three in particular that I have here, and then one bonus that is very inexpensive, virtually doesn't cost anything, that can help you save a lot of time, frustration, and hopefully reduce the chances of you burning out and getting fed up with doing the same things over and over again, and hopefully also increasing your profitability by freeing up time that you can then use to do something else that's maybe more profitable than plucking feathers. And speaking of, I'm talking about poultry processing in particular in this video. Again, we are not professional homesteaders. We don't do it for profit. We just do it to improve our health and well-being and to take control of our food supply. I have a day job. My wife's with the kids. So profitability is not the most critical aspect, but profitability from a time perspective and return on my time investment is very important to me, because anytime I am not spending on making money, I'm not making any. So from that perspective, I want to talk about two tools we use a lot for poultry processing. One is a Scalder that makes it so much easier to pluck feathers, and the other one is then the actual plugging, which again, if you've ever done it by hand, especially if you don't have a scalder and scald the bird before, it just takes forever and it can be a real pain in the butt. Now, if you have only one bird to pluck or a handful of birds, maybe every so often, not a big deal. But if you're like us and grow 30, 50 broilers at a time, or maybe if you're want to get into professional poultry business and you have a ton of broilers to process, or turkeys or whatever your favorite birds might be, it can just take a lot of time. And so two things that we rely on heavily are a scalder and a plucker. Now, we've been using this 14.5 gallon scalder from Stromberg's Chicken for several years. In fact, before we purchased our first batch of broilers, meat birds, I told my wife that we're not going to be plucking manually, so we need something that can speed up the time. And so I went online and I looked around and I found this scalder here. It costs around $390, I think, these days. So it's a couple of $100 worth of investment. And we were thinking, well, then a couple of $100 more for the plucker. Is it really worth it, or should we do it by hand? And in retrospect, I'm so glad we decided to invest in those tools, because they make processing birds so much easier. And what I like about this unit in particular is it's fairly well built. It's stainless steel, 201 stainless steel it is. It has a temperature gauge on the front, so you can dial in what temperature you want. We typically have it 145 degrees, but you can dial this guy up to 230. I don't know if that's advisable for plucking, but you could. Typically what I do is on processing day, I come up first thing in the morning, I fill it up and I turn it on, because it can take 2 hours or so to get to your target temperature, again depending on the temperature of your water that you put in, depending on the ambient air temperature maybe. But I would usually give it a couple of hours. One thing is that's important that you should pay attention to, because I made that mistake in the beginning. I plugged it into a shared outlet that was also used by one of our cold plunges, and the combination of the chiller of the cold plunge and the scalder here overloaded the circuit, and so the GFCI popped and it wasn't heating anymore. And we only found out when it was time, when we all came down and got ready, to start the processing. So that's one thing. Pro tip: plug it into a dedicated outlet if you can, and maybe every so often check and make sure that it didn't overload the outlet. Again, if you have a 15 amp outlet, 120 15 amp outlet, you'll be fine. But if you use a shared outlet, there could be a possibility of you overloading the circuit. But beyond that, the other thing I really like, it's super easy to clean. Once you're done, you can take out this inner basket here. That's typically then where all of the feathers that came off during the scalding collect, and you can just rinse them out. I typically rinse this once we are done, and then there is an insert here. That's basically the bottom that sits right above the heating elements here to protect the heating elements. And so I take this out, I rinse it, I hose it down, and then it has this valve on the front here that makes it super easy to drain. It's all the way on the bottom, so almost everything drains out at the very end. Then I just tip it over a little bit, maybe put a brick or a piece of wood underneath, so it stays at that angle and drains everything out. And then it's ready, to be used next time again. So it's really, really easy. It's, I would argue, very cost effective at less than $400. I think over time, you'll save so much time by doing this, by scalding your birds, that it's totally worth it. Now, this basket here, again, it's 14.5 gallons, so it fits 1 to 2 chickens, depending on the size of the chicken. If you have a, big as meat bird, might be only one. What we typically do is we grab the bird by the feet and we dunk it, we agitate it a little bit. That makes it even easier. It makes sure that the hot water actually gets under all of the feathers, because they are usually greasy. Chickens try to oil up their feathers to make them more water repellent, and so you want to agitate a little bit, and that's why we typically just put in one bird at a time. But you could put in 2 birds and then use a stick or whatever to agitate it. Definitely possible. And again, makes the whole process so much easier. The only limitation that we ran into with this particular model is when we processed turkeys for the first time, I did not think ahead and anticipate that a grown tom at butchering weight might be too big. I mean, we processed we had kind of like a heritage breed of turkey, so they were a little bit smaller than the production birds, fortunately, because they barely fit into. In fact, we took out the inner basket, and so they just fit in, but it was very, very tight, and I would not necessarily recommend trying to scald production turkeys in the smaller unit. For that particular reason, we actually upgraded. Now, Stromberg has different scalder sizes. There is one that looks like this, just a little bit bigger. I think it has 16.5 gallons or so, or even more, but I have no hands-on experience with that, so I can't really talk about it in detail, but it's bigger for sure. So we opted for this commercial grade scalder, which has a 29-gallon capacity, so it's huge comparatively speaking, and you can easily fit a couple of birds in there, or a full-grown turkey. And much like, I mean, this is 3 or 4 stainless steel, so it's very heavy-duty stainless steel, definitely thicker than this guy, also significantly more expensive. This thing costs over $2,000, so it might not be for the, if you're just processing birds as a hobby, that might be a little bit overkill for you. But if you're more into, commercial poultry processing, if you're selling your meat birds, this might be an excellent option. And we really like it because it's so heavy duty. It's built like a tank. This is the basket. It's huge. And there's larger heating elements obviously on the bottom, so the water heats up quickly. And the one thing I really like about this guy is it has a digital temperature control on the front here, so we can really dial in the exact temperature that you want. And it's also fine with the analog temperature control here, nothing wrong with it, but this is just more precise, so you can be sure that the water has the exact temperature for extended periods if you process 30, 40, 50 birds or so in one shot. The other thing I like about it, especially if you want to save some time and instead of being agitating the birds to get the hot water everywhere, it has actually an air inlet here, so you can attach an air compressor and blow in air that creates bubbles, and that agitates the water and make sure it moves everywhere on the skin to make it then very easy for the feathers to come off. So that's another thing that I really like. And then it has the drain valve here on the back. It has 4 wheels that can all be locked separately. Very easy then to move around, at least on even ground. The one downside, so to say, is it comes with a 220 volts NEMA plug here, so you cannot just plug it into your regular 120, 115, 120 outlet. So this is a heavy duty kind of machine, and you need the dedicated outlet for it. I mean, if we were in Europe right now, it would not be a problem because all of the outlets are 220, but here in the US, that's not the case. So you need a dedicated outlet. Fortunately, we have a 220 or a 240 actually here for one of our saunas, so we can easily plug that in. But this guy, I really like. It's heavy duty and it's gonna make processing birds for us even easier than with the smaller one. The second unit, or the third in this case now, but the second type of device that I really like is this heavy duty 2 horsepower plucker that has a ton of rubber fingers on the inside that strip away the feathers. Oh, another branch came down. That strip away the feathers in 30 seconds. I mean, you can throw in there maybe a couple of birds. Let's see what I want to say. It fits 3 to 4 chickens at a time, again, depending on the size, or maybe a turkey or two. You throw them in, it spins for 30 seconds, and the bird is completely clean. If you've done a good job scalding before, obviously that is. And I really like this guy. It's heavy duty. It's stainless steel, even though you see it here in blue, but we haven't removed that shrink wrap yet. We had it on from the beginning, but it doesn't bother me. It has a water protected power switch on the outside, and it also has a hose inlet, so you can attach your garden hose, turn it on, and it helps with flushing out the feathers, and that makes cleaning then at the end significantly easier. Now, speaking of cleaning, as you can imagine, smaller feathers like to get stuck around those rubber fingers, especially where those rubber fingers are attached. And even though there is water running and flushing it constantly, at the end of the session, I still have to go in and hose it down with a garden hose and then, plug out some of those feathers by hand. The other thing I usually have to do is, here on front, there is the chute where the feathers come out, right? At least the ones that make it through the system and flush out. But sometimes I have to, grab in carefully because there is like a sharp lip from the stainless steel. Don't cut your fingers, but you can go in here and then pull out some of those feathers. Sometimes they get stuck a little bit. That's a little bit of a downside. So it adds another, it's 10 minutes at the end of the day, that you have to spend on rinsing this guy out and cleaning it so it's ready for next time. It's not a big deal, but I guess at the end of a butchering session where you've spent all day or half day, processing birds, I wouldn't mind if I didn't have to spend those extra 10 minutes, but it is what it is. And for the time savings we get here in comparison, obviously, to plugging the bird manual, it's 100% worth it. And again, it's well built. It's built like a tank. I mean, you can probably stand on there and it wouldn't do anything to it. It's solid. It's really solid. It goes through all 3 of those units, and that's why, once we've seen the quality of those builds from Strombergs, we keep buying from them because they make just top-notch equipment that has been working really, really well for us. Now, the last thing I want to share with you that can significantly speed up your processing at the end of the day, especially once the birds have been dispatched, is something that's incredibly inexpensive and cheap, and that is something like this, PVC pipes. And I got this idea from Justin Rhodes. He actually has one of those builds in his book that he recently released, Homestead builds, I think it's called. And it's a drying rack that you can put together. You can make it, exactly as you want to. We have maybe 20 of those pipes and a couple of those connectors. And the idea is that you create like a rack, right? That can be either on the floor or on a table. And then once you're done cleaning out the bird and rinsing it, maybe you stick it on top of here for the bird to dry, so you can vacuum seal it. And that's just such a time saver because it means all the birds can dry while you do everything else. And once they're sufficiently dry, you can vacuum seal them in a batch instead of having to, pat every bird down and, do a lot of things that you would have to do otherwise. So the drying rack out of simple, inexpensive PVC piping is another huge time saver that we use every time we process meat birds or any other poultry, really, for that matter. You can even use it for rabbits if you wanted to. Super, super handy, and I really like it. And with that, we're gonna wrap up this video. Let me know, how do you process birds? Do you use Scalder and a plucker? Do you do it by hand? What have you found? I believe that most people forget that time isn't free. If I spend a whole lot of time plucking feathers, that takes me away from doing something that could make money, like producing this video for you, or spending time with the family. So time is money at the end of the day, even in homesteading or even in the context of homesteading. And we absolutely appreciate having those tools so we can speed up the process and make them feel less like a chore, enjoy them more, and then move on and do something else. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with someone who could use it. Until next time.